We're going where you want to go so you can be where you need to be. It's Road Gang Radio with Lindsay, Lawler, and Jimmy Mack on RadioNemo.com.
I'm really excited about tomorrow's show, by the way. One thing that is a little piece of news, we won't be having Canada Calling. There just something came up. Those guys are busy. They're always on the road. They send their regrets. But it does mean we might get to spend a little extra time with our good friend Dean Croak as Dat Guy arrives on the scene.
Who's Dat Guy?
Dean Croak is going to be arriving lean and mean early on the scene, and maybe we'll roll over and do some work there. Of course, another edition of Washington Trucking Week as our friends from OOIDA arrive on the scene to give us all the skinny on the fat cats. But what I'm really stoked about, Lindsay, is the two guests that we're going to be having in the second hour and the second 2 hours. The Atlas Immersive Experience and Linda Lee are both going to be joining us. The Atlas Immersive Experience, I'll let them explain that. There's a lot that goes on in there. And then Linda Lee is going to be talking about the Route 66 cookbook. So it's going to be, once again, another edition of Making a Living, Making a Life here on Road Gang Radio with your, I guess you would call him the phone maestro of motoring mayhem, Andre Thibodeau, and my co-host and executive producer, Lindsay LaRue, who Trucker Bosun says good morning to. Good morning to you,
My
Lindsay.
name is Lindsay Lawler, though. I think you have to stop calling me LaRue because I said there is somebody named Lindsay LaRue out there. I meant to tell you that.
Oh, we'll stop that right now.
People to get confused.
All right, Lindsay Lawler, we got it.
Sorry.
Madam Ambassador. Madam Ambassador is lean and mean and on the scene.
I liked the nickname until I found out there was somebody else, and I was like, we can't.
We end that.
Anymore.
This ends right here, right now. No more LaRue. Lindy, lucky Lindy. Lindsay, would you care to do the honor, speaking of groovy and amazing guests and arriving just in the nick of time for the holidays, too?
I would care very deeply to do this introduction because I am very much looking forward to this conversation. It hits on a lot of levels, and I think the timing of it is perfect. So our first guest on the second half of this, How We Make a Life Day, is someone who has managed to take a feeling that we all have. We have all experienced this, and a lot of us, Jim, still carry it quietly, whether realizing it or not, and turn it into a meaningful and researched and deeply human exploration. I'm talking about loneliness. You may know Don Martin from his hit podcast, Head on Fire, which also, by the way, sounds like the story of my life, or from his viral presence over on TikTok, where he has built a community of close to 500,000 people through thoughtful storytelling, love that, cultural insight. He's also a poet, a novelist, and now the author and narrator of a very powerful new original audiobook, Where Did Everybody Go? Why We're Lonely But Not Alone. Just came out yesterday. So excited. I want to know how he celebrated. Anyway, in it, Don dives into the loneliness epidemic, not from fear, not from blame or buzzwords, but from curiosity and history and humor and real lived experience. As the U.S. Surgeon General reports that 1 in 2 American adults are lonely, Don unpacks how we got here, how technology and culture shape our connection, and most importantly, how we can rebuild community and belonging in a world that moves so fast, that scrolls faster, and leaves us feeling very isolated. So please make welcome to the show our friend. You are not lonely anymore because Don Martin has arrived on the scene. Don Martin, good morning. Happy to have you.
Oh my gosh, what an introduction. Thank you all so much for having me.
It is. It's actually our pleasure.
I want to be your best friend.
She does, actually. We've been talking about this all morning. We had an early phone call from a guy who actually successfully got through a cancer surgery and is in the midst of recovery right now. Had a lot of friends reach out to him. He's an older gentleman, he's very vibrant. He called in to talk about this as well. There's been talk of an epidemic of loneliness, but I wanted to kind of just start by asking one simple question. Define the difference between being lonely and being alone.
Oh, I really like this question. So being alone, having alone time can be incredibly recuperative. The feeling of loneliness, that kind of negative emotion that we ascribe to the word loneliness, is kind of a math problem. It's the subjective difference between the amount of time you'd like to spend in community with other people and the actual amount of time that you are spending with other people. So it's that sort of deficit in social connection. But alone time, just being in solitude, isn't necessarily loneliness. It's as long as that's alone time that you want, that you enjoy, that is recuperative for you. So, spending time after a really, intense being in public situation, going home and wrapping up in a cozy blanket and reading a book, that can be great recuperative alone time. But when that solitude turns into loneliness is typically where, hey, I wish I were around more people. I wish I had more, vital social connections and social bonds, and those just aren't happening for people.
Don, I spent the first half of my life surrounded constantly by people, especially in the first half of my adult life. Like I subconsciously assumed, I think, quantity over quality, and I have flipped the script on that, luckily. But I just remember, like, it was. I remember Jim asked me before you came on, do you remember what's the loneliest time you've been in your life? And I'm like, I remember it. I remember where I was when I was late, when I kind of woke up, so to speak, crying on the kitchen floor, and so many people around me and in my life, and so lonely. And I think, Don, it came later. I had never even gone to a movie alone, wouldn't eat alone, wouldn't do anything alone. And then I had a child, and all I want to do is be alone now.
Everybody go to bed.
Leave me alone. But it forced, we moved out to the woods, we adopted our daughter, and then I started having forced alone time, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So I bring that all up because, you describe loneliness as evolutionary, useful, just like hunger or thirst. So I'd love for you to break that down for our listeners, the idea of where when we're able to recognize that loneliness, how it can push us to expand.
Absolutely. I do want to touch on something that you just brought up, that idea of being around a lot of people and still feeling lonely. A lot of people think that loneliness, that math problem is about, I'm spending way too much time alone, but that's not what the research tells us. It's really all about that good quality social connection and social bonds. So spending way too much time alone, sure, could be a recipe for loneliness, but spending lots and lots and lots of time not being lost in that sea of people, that can also be a recipe for loneliness. So I think that people think I feel really lonely, I just want to go be around other people. That's not necessarily a good recipe for social connection. But
no, good point.
As far as
that really
kind of like that.
Sorry, real quick, just so you could, if you don't mind expanding one more minute on that, because are you saying that if we're forcing ourselves to be around people, that's really not that's putting a Band-Aid over it. That's not addressing.
Oh, absolutely.
Dealing with
it,
right?
I had Matthias Mell, one of the researchers, Dr. Matthias Mell that I spoke to out of the University of Arizona, kind of described it to me this way. He's like, are you alone when you're at a concert? Are you alone when you're at a coffee shop, and you're not with friends or something like that? The answer to that is yes, because you're not actually there, in conversation, engaging with other people. You're still there by yourself. So, if that is adding to that amount of time that you aren't spending with other people that you wish you were, actually forging social bonds, social community, where you are specifically, talking to another human being, communicating, connecting to another actual human being that knows that you're there. That can be a recipe for that alone time turning into loneliness. But to get to your evolutionary question there, I think the Inside Out movies actually really helped lay the groundwork for a lot of people. If you've ever seen one of the Inside Out movies, Disney and Pixar did a wonderful job of explaining how all of our emotions are actually evolved to do a specific job. They actually are there to help us do things. Dr. Heather Lynch, another researcher that I spoke to, taught me that anger can actually help us in decision making and problem solving. So if you actually have an easier time working through situations, problem solving, if you get a little worked up, if you're a little mad about it, because you're more likely to spend more time focusing on that solution because you're just kind of mad about it. So loneliness, like all of the emotions, joy, anger, sadness, they all have a job. Loneliness also has a job, but it isn't like those other emotions. It's more like a biological imperative, more like hunger or thirst. And if somebody's like, well, I don't, is that an emotion? Yes, of course it is. You feel hungry. You feel thirsty. And hunger's job is to tell us that we need to eat. Thirst's job is to tell us that we need to drink. Loneliness's job is to tell us to seek out other people, because somewhere way back up the evolutionary line, humans figured out that we survive better when we go at life in groups.
I love this. I love this.
So basically what we're measuring here is a human connection deficit. I mean, that's
absolutely
really, at its core, loneliness is basically deciding where, and the problem is, as Lindsay kind of brought up, and that you have actually explicated on, is that sometimes we know we're lonely. Here's the problem. We know we're lonely. We know we need to be around people, but then we go put ourselves around people just in kind of a forced march to go do that, and we end up feeling lonelier than we've ever felt before. So with that mindfulness, the idea we become aware of that, is there a mindful way to then say, I am lonely, I need to make connections, but simply putting myself out there, or even sometimes calling a friend, unless it's Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, sometimes calling a friend isn't even helpful at this point. And what do we do, not just recognizing our loneliness, but what are ways out of it?
Well, so the answer to like how to get out of loneliness is going to depend from person to person. So like introverts and extroverts, they both need pretty much the same amount of social connection. They just go about getting it in different ways. One of the most unique ways that I've heard from experts about kind of breaking out of a cycle of loneliness came from Sherry Fippen, who was a city planner for decades, who taught me that using your front door can actually be a recipe to reconnect organically with community.
That's just great. I just had a vision of me walking out the door, and you just think, oh, it's like literally opening yourself up.
Literally opening yourself up. So when we talk about loneliness, a lot of the conversation ends up going into research that was put forward by folks like Ray Oldenburg or Robert Putnam, people who talk about like disconnection, people who talk about like how we are kind of physically isolating ourselves. And that's true. There's a big conversation around like the suburbanization of America, how we have these huge swaths of homes that are disconnected from places of commerce, places of entertainment, places of, letting your hair down. So, it used to be in the long ago, we all kind of lived in mixed use spaces. So, your apartments and your homes and stuff would be down the street from like your neighborhood bar, right? The Cheers idea, your neighborhood coffee shop and yada, yada, yada. But the way that zoning laws work now, we don't really have that. I mean, could you imagine how, moving into a subdivision and then realizing that the house 3 doors down is getting turned into a bar? Little Timmy might see that people drink alcohol from time to time. And, oh, God, what would happen if kids could see that people drink alcohol? But Sherry Fippen taught me that in this whole conversation of the suburbanization of America, if you look at a lot of modern build subdivisions, the garage is set before the front door. And that is leading so many of us because we don't, because where we work isn't near our home, because where we eat isn't near our home, our grocery stores aren't near our home. If we have to take our kids to soccer practice or ballet or something, that is not near our home. We have to get into our cars and go somewhere. So we tend to enter and exit our homes through our garages. We enter and exit our home through our garages, get in our car, and leave. We aren't really using our front door. It's almost like the appendix of the house. It's just kind of there.
We call our front door the Amazon door, and that's it.
There you go. Yeah, that's where your boxes are dropped, and that's the only time you go in and out of your front door sometimes is to open that door and grab your box and go back inside. And she taught me that in her experience as a city planner, that entering and exiting your home through your front door, that in homes where the front door is set before the garage, people experience less loneliness because they are more physically integrated into their communities. They are waving at their neighbors, even just for a few minutes. They're just like seeing who's around, who's moving in and out. And it's that teeny tiny, that's the thing that people that's I think what people get wrong about loneliness is they think that it's all about these like big primary relationships, maybe even these big secondary relationships, that one best friend I can always count on to always be there and da 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 da. But like what a lot of researchers taught me is that, discounting those tertiary relationships, the time that you're spending talking to your cashier, the time that you're spending talking to your barista, chatting with your neighbor, chatting with the person who, your neighborhood dry cleaner or something like that, all of those are meaningful connections as well. All of those people are part of what keeps you kind of stuck to your community, stuck to your neighborhood, feeling like you have a level of social trust within your community, that people might miss you if you weren't around. All of that is an equation to not feel lonely.
Wow. We're talking with Don Martin. You can head over to buydonmartin.com. B-Y. Don't buy, not B-U-Y. I don't think you're for sale, Don, but the book is. And you can certainly look into that. And Don, I want to let you know over in the chat, one of our listeners, Gina, said, there's a difference between isolated and lonely, which is a great pivot, Jim.
Pivot.
Because, we want to talk about COVID here briefly. And, you say it didn't create loneliness, that it amplified it. And so I'd love to talk about, were we unprepared emotionally or structurally for isolation? Was that just something, it was already there and it made us address some things? So how were we and weren't we, I guess, say, prepared for that isolation that came, and how is that different from loneliness?
So it's really interesting because a lot of people say, well, the world was different after COVID, and that's true, but COVID was more like a microwave. It just heated up a lot of pre-existing conditions, and it because we were all in our houses and we didn't have anything else to do, we noticed our isolation a lot more than we had in previous years. However, if you go back and look at the data, we had been in a year over year, decade over decade, like a social connection deficit that had been going back for years and years. Robert Putnam didn't write that book in the 90s out of nowhere. Bowling Alone came out decades ago. We've been talking about this forever. People. There's a pretty marked difference around 2006, 2007. That's about the year that malls started kind of dying off. Church attendance started declining. We stopped really going to like museums, a lot of these kind of like stalwart institutions where people used to gather that people used to think of as third places. We stopped going to those far before COVID ever locked us down. And it's just, a lot of stuff in society has been changing. 9/11 changed us. The housing crisis changed us. There's social media, the internet has changed the ways that we find and foster community. And I don't think that it can be discounted that for good or for ill, no matter which political party that you're a part of, there's been a lot of like us versus them, you can't trust them kind of rhetoric. And that has an impact of teaching us that like, people that you don't already know can't be trusted, that you shouldn't talk to them, stranger danger. And except, we were always supposed to be taught that like it takes a village to raise a child and, we're supposed to be a community and all of that. But we've been also spending a couple of decades telling people not to, ingratiate yourself with your community because your community is dangerous and is out to get you at the same time. And it's leading to a lot of mixed messages. But yeah, we've been in year over year, decade over decade withdrawal from one another. And it isn't helped by the suburban sprawl, by the fact that we are physically less connected than we are with one another. I mean, my gosh, before the pandemic lockdown, I worked in an office job. And I worked in an office job where my team was I'm here in the Chicago area. My team was in San Antonio. My team was in the Philippines. I mean, I worked with people, I sat at a desk, but like my coworkers weren't in the same state as me. And you don't really notice how weird that is until you're at home and realize that not a lot about your day has changed, but a lot about your day has changed at the same time. And that's where all of that focus on like, oh my gosh, this is weird. Like we our lives are weird right now. We're not connecting with one another right now. And that's kind of where I think COVID exacerbated a lot of pre-existing issues. And it just made us really, really focus on how disconnected we've become.
By the way, I do have a tip for you. You have so many wonderful pieces of advice and so many insights, but I want to tell you, next time you get locked down, do not play Animal Crossing. Play something you can play online with friends. I'm just going to straight up and say that from now on. That's a go-to. I don't know if did you see that whole statistic where the kids who actually went onto gaming platforms and played with one another kind of got through socially well adjusted through COVID, and the kids that actually did a lot of social media posting and oh woe is me and look at my isolation didn't come out as good. And and there are so many ways to connect with people. Can you talk a little bit about that? We're not taking advantage of what the internet is good for. We're actually using it as a toxic dumpster fire instead of what it could actually be good for, which is staying in touch with people we love and setting up opportunities to see them in real life, right?
Absolutely. You bring up a phenomenal point, and something that I talk about in the audiobook, Where Did Everybody Go? The internet can be a third place. A third place is one of those places outside of school or work where you don't have to be, but you can gather to, let your hair down and talk to people and get to know one another and build a community and all of that. And that's where people talk a lot about like the neighborhood bar, the neighborhood coffee shop, and all of those kinds of things. But like we're finding in the modern era that, research is proving to us that like platforms like World of Warcraft, Animal Crossing, some of these online platforms where you can be in community or in connection with other people despite differences can, for some, be a viable third place option. I go into a conversation. There's a beautiful documentary. I want to say it's The Remarkable Life of Ebeline, which you can watch on Netflix. Ibeln. I might have the rest of that title wrong, but that's definitely correct. That talks about this guy with a terminal illness who found this beautiful, beautiful community, this whole second life, and spent a decade building this brilliant life, this interconnected life of friends and found family through World of Warcraft. When he died, his parents thought that he died without friends, without having really had a great love in his life or anything like that. And turns out, not only did he have a lot of friends, but he was kind of a womanizer. He kind of was a bit of a player, and he had a rich life. And there's a lot of people out there in all sorts of communities, especially marginalized communities, where being online, being on gaming platforms, some social media platforms and sites allow people to come together and form community where they might not otherwise have that option.
By the way, you got the title right. I saw it, Lindsay. You should watch it. It is just it's right up your alley. It will wreck you. Yeah. It will wreck you. It's like the end
in a good way.
It's
I love a good womanizer film.
No.
I know that's not what it's about.
Yeah, but what's great is it's like the end of Big Fish, man. His parents think no, what a sad little life, and it's like all of a sudden it's like nope. Not at all. I mean, here comes everybody. It's a great documentary, and it's brilliant. It's so worth checking out.
Can we? Okay, this is a quick. It's funny. I feel like there's a real miscommunication in what we think we want versus what we actually want, and I say that because I know, shocking. I say that because we always joke like, oh, I don't want to talk to someone on the phone. I want everything to be automated. I don't want to shop. I want it to come to my doorstep, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to see or connect or talk to people. However, my dream, and actually every single one of my friends I talk to, and we're talking about it right now, is living on a compound with people I love. Why is this? I think a lot of people say that is a dream. We found a piece of land. My friend, my daughter's uncle who's here in town was staying with us. We literally are searching for land, and we found a piece, sent it to a bunch of friends, and within minutes we had 10 people are like, we're in. Why do people say they want to be alone and yet also dream of living on a compound?
Yeah, and it's kind of like that, why do people like Disneyland thing? And it's like, oh, I get to, spend a few days pretending I live in this walkable community. And that was actually going back to my buddy Sherry Phippen, the city planner. She said, one of the great hopes that I have is the prominence of the up-and-coming prominence of planned communities, which are kind of what you're talking about, but on a much bigger scale, where there is a single developer who is creating kind of like what you're talking about, that planned community where there's homes, but it's homes next to businesses, next to grocery stores, next to stables, next to basketball courts, next to schools, and it's all that kind of Hallmark community, but more integrated and diverse and accessible than Hallmark likes to make it out to be. But it's a place where community is integrated with one another in all of those facets. There's multi-use development, and because it's not like, it's all zoned so that it can all be multi-use, multi-purpose. And people want that. People crave that ability to be in community with their neighbors, to walk from their homes to school, to walk from their home, to have the grocery store in that accessible reach. And that's kind of that when we think of neighborhoods, when we think of the ideal, American neighborhood, that's kind of what we think of, but it never really existed. So people are starting to make them.
You just answered the question. I get it now, because it's when you said people crave it. It's we want things to be easy, and that we want now that we realize things can be so easy. I can blink and a package can be at my door, etc. We want things simple, and that is what has kind of forced the isolation. But it didn't mean that we didn't want to be around people. So what you're saying, these planned communities bring the two wants that we have together. We do have an innate desire to connect, but we also want life to be easier as we have the technology to do so. So
absolutely, we want life to be accessible. We want life to be affordable. We want life to be connected. We want life to be communal. But we've solved, some of those things, but we've solved them in isolation. Matthias Mell talked to me a little bit about how technology has made things, has made independence convenient and preferable, right? Where I can do it on my own. So we've kind of invented a world where I can go throughout my entire day without ever speaking to another person, but I can grocery shop, I can go to the gym, I can go on the train, I can go to work, I can do and I don't have I'm not buying a ticket from a human to get on the train. I'm doing it on an app, and I'm not buying groceries from a cashier. I'm doing it through a robot, and I'm ordering an Uber on an app. All of those kinds of things. Everything is now accessible and maybe somewhat affordable because of that supply chain, depending on who you are and where you are. But we've removed the human component from it almost completely. And now we're starved for connection and wondering why. Wow. So now, a lot of people are trying to bring back in that community aspect, that connection aspect.
When you find yourself waiting by the Amazon door for the Amazon people to arrive so that you can talk to them, you probably have a human connection deficit.
When you straddle the Amazon delivery driver, maybe.
There are people that do that, who buy things on Amazon just so that they can have a box to wait for. And I'm not going to say I haven't done that, but my husband likes to complain about how many boxes show up to the house sometimes. So I'm guilty of it myself.
Yeah, you think about how many people actually have an ongoing personal relationship with their UPS guy. Where did everybody go? Why we're lonely, but not alone. It's author Don Martin has joined us this morning. He's also the host of the hit podcast Head on Fire. And if you check out his viral TikTok videos, there's a reason he has got almost 450,000 followers. It's good to have you. And by the way, I'm going to do this. Lindsay usually does this. Promise us you'll come back.
Please.
Promise us you'll come back.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me. Really appreciate it.